Prakriti ma'am, are you here?
Yeah, hi Anjum.
Okay, so I think we can now begin with the webinar. I think it's already 10:10 and we do have quite a good number of participants for today. So very good morning to all. My name is Akrif Tushar Mandal and I'm a teaching faculty at the Periyar School of Architecture, New Delhi. I welcome you all to the 24th webinar in the Every Friday webinar series, a platform for young minds to express their ideas. So today's webinar will be discussing biocoding and will be presented by architect Onik. So before introducing the speaker for today, I would like to introduce Professor Prakriti Mehta, who is one of our mentors for the school. I request ma'am if you could just give us some words of motivation for today.
Hi. Sorry, I'm trying to switch on my video, but perhaps there's a bandwidth issue. Hi, welcome everyone, and especially to our speaker from you, Stephanie, if I'm pronouncing it right. And I'm looking forward to a great enriching experience with connecting with biocoding with the speaker today. This is a webinar series by the Royal School of Architecture in Code 1. And I encourage and I request all the participants here, if you have any ideas to share with all of us with respect to your subject, whether it is with respect to something that you foresee as a future or you want to research upon, I think this is the place where you can really start interacting with people, network with people, and begin your larger associations in that subject. Um, and once again, I welcome all the participants who are here joining us and the speakers for the day. And I'm really looking forward to thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So now I will introduce the speaker for today's webinar. Salah Ahmed Anik is an architect and academician based in Dhaka, Bangladesh. He completed his bachelor's in architecture from the Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology and master's in urban design from the Bartlett School of Architecture, UCL. He has experience working in architecture and planning industry for almost 6 years and is the co-founder of Anushango, Bangladesh. Besides practicing, he is a full-time faculty at the Department of Architecture, North South University. Today, he will be talking about biocoding from rituals to self-organizing system. I request Onik to now begin his presentation. And once again, it's a request to all the participants to keep themselves muted for the duration of the presentation. Once the presentation is over, we will have a question, answer, and discussion session when you can ask your questions. Onik, you can now begin with the presentation.
Great. Thanks a lot, Tushar. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. It is good to be here and presenting in this way. And you actually, it actually seems fitting and honor for me to be presenting in this series. The title of my presentation is The Biocoding from Rituals to Self-Organizing System. So the presentation presentation has 3 parts. So on the first part, I will give an overview of how architects are using biology to extract information and construct infrastructures. On the second part, how we are using the biocomputation for visualizing data and how contemporary architects are using it. And on the third part, I will explain how we used biocoding to New Urban City in one of our research projects. So let's begin. Today, biology is different from the 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, people were studying that book, which we can call On Growth and Form by Darcy Thompson. Architects and designers were inspired by the biology many years, actually more than 100 years. Humans are always being inquisitive about their environment and wanted to understand the different patterns of the nature. So early human use intuitive methods for the pattern recognition, which can be termed as magic rituals. at that time, and modern day humans use mathematics to study different morphology of the biological system and or the natural environment. So, and architects are using this mathematical equation, or you can call this ritualistic information or the intuitive method for many years on designing buildings and infrastructures like Parthenon. You can see the golden ratio or the Fibonacci series of snail structures have been utilized to found out a proportion that that can be aesthetically pleasing or infrastructurally well enough to build. So, and in 1960s and 70s, German architects Frey Otto did a series of biological experiments such as soap bubble experiment, sandbox experiments, and other study coral growth to understand how different natural systems works and use this data on a larger scale project. Here you can see that Frey Otto did some soap bubble experiments on the 1960s to understand the surface tensions of soap bubble and different biological natural systems. So you use this tension data on a larger scale projects such as Munich Olympic Stadium and some urban projects on which he did not implemented on Germany. So, but he wrote this data on his book Connection and Connectivity later that year. So now today biology is different in many ways than 100 years ago, or the how earlier humans used it. So we are using computation methods to understand the environment. Here comes the term biocomputation. It is basically using the living system to compute the solution of human problems. With the help of technology, it is possible to grow cells in isolation rather than in a living organism. It is possible to visualize 2-dimension and 3-dimension incredible growth process like the development of salamander from 1 cells to millions. And it is also possible to visualize our inner body structure more accurately than the CT scan or the MRI scan, and more safely using the technology called photoacoustic imaging. So contemporary architects are now using this biocomputation technology and taking advantage of sorry, contemporary architects are now taking advantage of this technology. On Japan, the authority used the SLIMOL network system to calculate the shortest path to calculate the train network system. The SLIMOL network system actually works in a shortest path network. SLIMOL always moves on the shortest paths to find its food sources, and it can calculate where its food sources in a shortest distance, located in a shortest distance, and set up the network on basis of the shortest pathway. So basically, they use this shortest path algorithm of the SLIMOL network to distribute the train networking system on the Tokyo. So actually, you can call it as a supercomputer, as a SLIMOL. Sorry. You can call it as a supercomputer, the SLIMOL algorithm as a supercomputer. So now, what is biocoding? It's a combination of both biointelligence and artificial intelligence. We can call it collective intelligence, the same way as the biocomputation. here the both intelligence are used to extract data and compute solutions. So we use this method in one of our research project 1 year ago to tackle the adverse effect of global warming and climate change, and set a new method to developing architecture and urban morphology. The research we did 1 year ago had 4 parts. The first part is urban scenario, second part is biointelligent material, the third part is the new urban city, and the last one is photosynthetic voxels. For our research project, we choose London and started to collect different air pollution data. The air pollution such as carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, PM 2.5 and PM10 particle data were visualized over the London city grid to see which area is now most polluted. More circles on a particular grid point means there are different sources which are polluting the areas. The circle radius means the amount of emission. The bigger the circle, the more the pollutant emission on that area. From the data, we found that east part of the London is now more polluted than the other areas. So we started working on East London and mapped different sources of pollutant absorbers such as trees to figure out how much unabsorbed air pollutants were remaining on the environment. Based on this data, we made a prediction model to see how East London will change in next 50 years. It will change from no dry season, warm summer to dry season, hot summer. That means frequent droughts will increase and London will lose a massive amount of green spaces and ground level of invertebrates. So how to tackle this issue now? How can we choose a different path? It is interesting that not all species get affected by the global warming and the climate. One of the example is the common feather moth. It can be found all over the land. These moths are the earliest land plants and being here for almost 470 million years. They have a high level of survival rate than most of the species on the earth. From this point of view, we started study the common feather moths. They have photovoltaic properties, high level of nitrogen and carbon dioxide absorption rate, high level of oxygen production rate, and support the lower level of invertebrates such as ants, worms, spiders, which will be lost due to global warming and the climate change in the London in next 50 years. We developed MOX voxel setups to study growth pattern of the common feather moths. Different voxels were placed in different temperatures, humidity, and carbon condition over 3 months to observe the growth. We photographed the moths regularly and digitally sample this growth. With these digital samples, we started to simulate moss growth, and we finally able to simulate the growth using a particular algorithm known as space colonization algorithm. On the next part of our research, we developed a new urban morphology. We applied the moss growth algorithm over the whole East London city. The growth started from highest point of pollutant emission. The algorithm tried to develop a path system that connected all the dispersed green spaces of the city area. And And we converted this two-dimensional growth structure data to a three-dimensional growth structure data. Now, these data, so you can see that are mostly abstract. So how can we actualize this three-dimensional Morse growth data that we applied on the city grid of East London? So here comes the artificial intelligence. To actualize this data in this way, we use machine learning system called CycleGAN. The GAN is relatively a new AI technology. It is invented by Ian Goodfellow in 2014. The CycleGAN was invented 3 years later in 2017. We can call a GAN as an artificial neuron. If we input different images to CycleGAN system, it will try to figure out the pattern of the images. And based on the data set, it can generate different image outputs. We input almost 16,000 sorted images of our 3D growth structures that the Morse algorithm has given us, and East London satellite image data to CycleGAN. As a result, we got new urban satellite images showing how the city morphology will change over the next 50 years if we use the Morse growth algorithm. So here you can see that in the next 50 years, if we applied the Morse growth algorithm on the satellite image, so all the green it will try to connect all the green spaces, and as a result, we analyze that over 30% green area will increase if we can apply this algorithm system on the current city grid. Now, how to interpret these images, these two-dimensional images of this novel city that we got from the CycleGAN. We used abductive and speculative approach rather than going on a traditional manner, which leads us to our last part of the research called development of photosynthetic boxes.
Anik?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's a request to all the participants as well. I will be restarting the meeting just now, so I will end this meeting and start the meeting again. And I request all the participants to just rejoin the meeting using the same link that we have been given before. Given before. It's due to a technical issue that we are facing currently, but yeah. So I will just end this meeting and start it again. And it's a request to all the participants. Yes, Anika, let's just wait for like 1 or 2 minutes for all the participants to join back in, and then we can resume. I sincerely apologize to all the participants for the inconvenience. In the meantime, Anik, if you go reshare your screen.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, it's visible, but it's okay now. It's in slideshow mode. Okay. Okay, I think you can now resume with the presentation on.
Thank you, Tushar. So For the research project, we developed two types of photosynthetic voxel. The first type contains different types of sensors such as temperature, carbon, mist dispenser, and moss on the either end of the boxes. These sensors monitor and control the indoor environment of the voxels. For the second type of second prototype, we used biomaterial to grow moss all over the surface rather than just to end. On the second prototype, there is no sensor here. These voxels are now aggregated to create different wall structures, which we call biowall, simulated how on different wall system the moss will grow based on the solar radiation analysis and how much each wall can consume carbon dioxide and nitrogen oxide. So earlier we saw that the cycle GAN has generated an image that we're trying to interpret in a three-dimensional way on an abductive and speculative manner. So to interpret that image, so we used 56 meter, 16 meter, and 72 meter substrate on the current city grid of the East London. This substrate is actually a 22-story abandoned council building located on the Danish Point. The moss has the photovoltaic capacity. Based on the temperature of the surface and the solar radiation, it will grow. So we analysis the solar. We did a solar analysis of that structure of the substrate, both indoor environment and the outdoor environment. And based on the solar analysis, we applied the moss growth algorithm all over our substrate. So if you zoom into one particular area, you can see that the whole substrate is wrapped around by the moss growth algorithm or the moss success algorithm growth pattern. We choose more to detail out the infrastructure. So we choose a 16 meter by 32 meter area to distribute the voxels on the infrastructure and create the biowall. So based on the moss growth algorithm, the voxels are distributed in different layers or different stacks. And these different stacks or the verticals, we can call it the vertical biowall stacks, replace the existing infrastructure. So on this manner, so the whole aggregation was done on the whole substrate, on the whole substrate area of 56 meter, 16 meter, and 72 meter. You can see that there are 6 different stacks that were replacing the existing infrastructures there. So, and after distributing these voxels, we try to categorize the different spaces for different species. So this interface not only supports the human, but also supports different levels of other species such as ants, moths, beetles, moles, and worms. So each voxel has a different texture, different morphology, and different type of smoothness and the sunken areas. So so each typology will create different interfaces for different interfaces and the habitats for different species here. And also the larger resolution of the voxel will create interfaces for different human activities. So on the Danish Point area, there are no bars. So we try to introduce different kinds of park and other activities, physical activities areas on this vertical infrastructure. So we can call it a vertical park made out of photosynthetic voxels. So you can see that different category of spaces of indoor environment actually creating different niches for human activities like jogging, meditation, exercising, and other places like gardenings. So here is some render images of the infrastructure, the interior environment of the voxel infrastructure here also, and how it will look like on the ground level if we voxelized all the infrastructure. So this type of system actually can be termed as the synthetic environment or synthetic uh, territorial ecosystem. It is actually generated from the natural system, but we are using the technology and other interfaces to control the certain environment and the other things that will happen based on because of the global warming and the climate change. So we term it as the tertiary synthetic ecosystem, where the both human species and the non-human species can coexist. So okay, this will be my last slide, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Onik. I think it was a wonderful presentation, which was well explained and informative as well. So participants can now ask questions. You can either just unmute yourself and ask a question, or just put the question in the chat box, whichever you prefer. But yes, so we open the floor now for the participants to ask any questions that they might be having. So is there any question that I can see? Okay, I think so. Let me just start with a question on it. I think it was a wonderful presentation. So you talked about the human and non-human species coexisting, right? And I think design for non-human is something that is one of my personal areas of interest. So I would like to take this opportunity and want to maybe ask you, what are your views on, for example, your design output acting as an interface between the human and the non-human, not just both of them coexisting in isolation, but also the design fabric or the building fabric acting as an interface between the two.
Interface, Tushar?
Yes. So what I mean is, right now, for example, you have created this voxels, right? So
Yes.
the voxels, not just like in itself, they allow for like a reduction of carbon content in the air, and at the same time, they also create a mini ecosystem for small insects and birds to come and nest, right? But in itself, the whole building is an accommodation for humans. So you have created two sort of accommodations for both humans and non-humans. My question would be, what are your views about on the interaction between the two species?
What are the views of the interaction of the two species?
Yes, what are your views
asking?
on yes? What would be your views on that? How would the two species interact, not just coexist, but also interact with each other?
Interaction, I think, Tushar, that was there from the beginning, actually. So the earlier human actually interacted more with the the nature or the other species than we are doing now. So actually our views of distinguishing what is nature and what is artificial lead us to this modern urban planning and urban design, and we call the modern architecture. So the building remains the building, the landscape remains the landscape. So more of Western philosophy of secluding the nature from our system. So that is actually causing different kinds of problems now. And the climate change actually generated from from that point of view, because the interaction become loosened, and it is losing day by day now. So we are conquering the whole world and destroying the nature without knowing that how this species actually will help us to further for our survival. So we need this species, and we need this interaction actually to survive. So here on the synthetic ecosystem, actually we are trying to understand this sort of species by or the other interspecies by actually collecting their data. So collecting their data, how they are interacting, how they are actually growing on different interfaces, how they will grow on those interfaces of moss wall, or we can say that on the brio wall. So after collecting this data, we can actually the first thing on the very first or second slide, I say that we are actually studying the pattern recognition, or the pattern recognition actually is studying different species behavior. So from in this context that we developed here, so we are actually using the biocomputation and other sensory technologies or devices to study their data, study their behavior, study their pattern, and these data actually will help us to interconnect it with the other species. So species do not have the voices, they cannot understand us. Maybe they have the senses to understand what is emotion and other things, but to connect on a deeper level, we need to understand their behavior pattern by using the data. So the data is actually connecting the human and the non-human species here.
Thank you. So yeah, is there any other participant who want to ask a question? Please feel free to go ahead. You can just unmute yourself and ask, or you can maybe put the question in the chat box, whichever you feel comfortable with. But yeah, I mean, I would like to see some questions from the participants now. Participants. Okay, so we don't seem to be having any questions from the. I don't know if they're feeling shy, uh, or if the presentation was so brilliant that they do not have any questions right now. So, is there a question? Let me just quickly check once again.
I'm
Okay,
actually,
yeah, Amit, go ahead.
seeing actually Praveen here. So Praveen is one of my classmates, and we did this project together.
Okay, I see, I see.
Praveen and Kathy Anand. So
Okay,
we did this
I see.
project during our MR presentation. Praveen,
Yes, so I do welcome Praveen on the Praveen here as well. So if Praveen, if you want to share some comment, or if you want to give any your own views on the subject, then please feel free to go ahead.
Hi, Praveen here. Sorry, it was like unprecedented. I was not sure. Called out. So yeah, interesting presentation, Anik, and it was like reliving the past explorations. Amazing. Yeah. So it was well put in the last question how Anik explained how the data acts as a bridge between the non-human and the human species. We have excelled with the tools. So there's like the technologies that have found a way to detect temperature, humidity, and like every still it's a non-human factor which we could like conceive without any artifact which human has created. So yeah, like the space of experimentation wasn't to specify like one species getting connected with human. It's an eye-opener research which helped us to understand how a human species and a non-human species such as these plant species and probably like a few cryptograms such as lichens and moss and everything could coexist in an urban environment, right? So, for example, the research actually flows through the same direction. Is how to like the common factor between our species and then the reciprocant species such as moss is the ability to consume our waste. For example, like we breathe out carbon dioxide and then plants take in the carbon dioxide. So it's a simple equation. So we wanted to tally it in a way. However, in order to find the amount of the data, we have to like employ all the sensory technologies to to find a guide. Like for example, like those sensors and the data which you have seen in the urban maps represents the carbon emission data and nitrogen oxide emissions over the years. And we thought how cool would it be to tell the world that the global warming is actually happening, because like our modes of solving the global climatic change isn't actually doing anything great. Like planting millions of trees doesn't bring in the like it doesn't bring the earth to an like state where there is no global warming, right? So we have to look ahead and see into the available. Uh, sorry. So like, am I audible?
Yes, so
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll have to look into these species which we haven't even thought of, and have to bring in source them into the actual like world of existence, such as like co-living with artificial intelligence, biointelligence, and human intelligence. So it's like I know it's a little vague to explain it in this way, and we even had to conceive this idea for almost like 6-7 months to before bringing it onto the table and do some visualization. Yeah, this is from my end. And if you have any questions, I think we can discuss
okay.
the same.
Yeah, thank you, Praveen, for the wonderful insight. And I think you did bring up a very valid point that just planting trees right now is not the solution to global warming anymore. So I think it's high time that we, as a collective species, also look towards other non-human species, not just trees, in order to find solutions to bringing down the carbon content, to bringing down the global temperature. I think that's a very wonderful point. So thank you for the insight. So yeah, is there any other participant who would want to maybe give in a comment or add in their suggestions to the about the topic, or just ask a question in general? Then please feel free to just ask your question. You can either put it in the chat box or just unmute yourself and ask. I would really want to see some participant asking questions, because I think this is a very relevant and upcoming topic which needs to be discussed, because it's not just about talking about computation in architecture and design in isolation, not just about talking about biophilia in isolation. It's high time that we actually merge the two into a very cohesive sort of a design process, so that we don't necessarily have to add in steps where we design and then add in nature, but it's a part and parcel of the whole process itself. So I generally do want more participants to be very inquisitive about the topic, and if possible, then do ask your questions. So do we have any other question from any participant here? Okay, this is. So we don't seem to be having any other question or a comment about the topic. So I think we can now safely bring the webinar to a close today. So again, I thank Onik for the wonderful presentation and also thank all the participants for being here. Before closing, I would like to inform everyone about the Every Friday webinar series, which is being organized by the Peria School of Architecture, New Delhi. So the webinars are a platform for young professionals to express their ideas and are aimed at students and young architects. We will also be running short-term courses in summer schools in near future, and the information will soon be released. So please do keep a track of us especially on the YouTube channel. You can also find recordings of this webinar and the previous webinar on our YouTube channel as well. So yeah, with this, I think I would like to bring the webinar to a close. I thank all the participants. I especially thank Onik for making time for us today. And please have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Risha. Thanks, everyone.